and unfortunately, we miss Amy's great response there, but
well, I can say it again. Charlie Potts, the dean of the department at Arts Center, would always start the beginning students with a lecture, and he would start out saying, "People, the subject is light."
And without light, you don't have a picture. So, well, let's talk. I'm going to show several short YouTube videos about lighting, but the first one I want to, oh, that's not the wrong, well, I hit the wrong, hang on, let me hit share screen. Well, I can't do, I had to, oh, come on. Here, I complain about other people not being ready. I've totally lost my Zoom. Okay, everybody there now? Now let me hit share screen. Okay.
We don't see your screen.
We don't see a screen yet.
You don't, well, I haven't picked one yet. I'm looking. Okay. Well, there we go. Okay. This is getting close to where I want to be.
All we have is a black strap across the horizontal.
Really? You're not seeing anything?
Nope.
No.
No, black screen.
All right, let me stop share and do it again.
Are you trying to compare and contrast light and no light? That would be good.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you nailed it. Oh boy. Yeah, just what I need here. Just give. I'm going to have it up and running. That'll first. Maybe that'll solve my problem. Okay. Except now I can't see Zoom. Here we go. Okay, tell me if you can see the screen.
Yes.
It's the YouTube page.
Okay, good. So I'm going to start with
I want to see the man that ate an 8-pound burger in 30 minutes. That looked like a
this guy is I love this guy. I follow he has all these weird things. He's a doctor, and all the stupid things people done. And he goes in depth about what it did to their body. Okay, well, since we're talking about light, I'm going to take a brief moment to talk about what is light. Light has been a big mystery for scientists and physicists for years, hundreds of years, and we're still learning about light. But the light we see is a very narrow part of the electromagnetic spectrum. This is very brief. I'm not going to bore you. I'm just going to a couple of key things that I think is important from photography here. So
closer look at the electromagnetic spectrum.
Bring the volume up, Steve.
Light is only a small part
Volume?
of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Yes.
The electromagnetic spectrum refers to the many
That's
types
good.
of radiation released
Better.
from stars, including our own sun. Electromagnetic radiation travels in waves. Frequency describes how many waves per second a wavelength produces. Wavelength measures the length of an individual wave in meters. Scientists describe the electromagnetic spectrum as a long line. At one end lie radio waves, with the longest wavelengths and lowest frequencies in the spectrum. A single radio wave has the length of a football field. After radio waves come microwaves, which produce more energy due to shorter wavelengths and higher frequencies. Cell phones, radar, and microwave ovens use microwaves. Next comes infrared light. The sun, fire, living creatures, and other heat sources all produce infrared light. While we cannot see infrared light, we feel it as heat. Visible light occupies a narrow slice of the electromagnetic spectrum, nestled between infrared and ultraviolet.
okay,
light.
this is where the important part I want to get over or talk about first is this is a very narrow band that we as humans with our eyes can perceive, and of what we call visible light. And if you see a rainbow, it should get you this prism of these various wavelengths of light, which we perceive then as the wavelength changes, we perceive it as a different color. Some animals, other living things, actually, their visible spectrum can be different than ours. So this is how we as humans are seeing, and it's not necessarily the same way a camera is seeing. Okay, so keep that in mind.
Red
And
wavelengths have the lowest frequencies and longest wavelengths of visible light. As you move from red through orange,
Okay.
yellow, green, blue,
That-
and finally violet, wavelengths shorten and frequencies increase.
now I'm going to switch
Violet
to,
light, we move into ultraviolet frequencies. Human skin produces vitamin D when exposed to ultraviolet light, but excess
okay, now I'm going to go the one about photography. Hang on. Library VA class. Let's go with this guy, understanding light.
have the correct lighting,
Oh.
you on their phone, whereas others can't even get close to that on a high-end camera. Or maybe you've seen a beautiful cinematic, almost like a 3D render photo of a particular location. You go to that location, same light, same conditions, you take the same photo, but it just doesn't look anywhere near as good as the image that you've seen. Well, as the title suggests, in today's video, we're going to talk about what I believe is the most important part of photography. If you can get your head around this, if you can implement this in your photography going forwards, you will see a huge improvement. How do I know this? Well, from the countless workshops that I've done, this particular point was the biggest sort of aha moment for the people who were on my workshop with regards to understanding how to take a photo. Have you ever walked down the street and you saw an amazing subject in the distance? You run over, you grab a picture, you even set your lens to f1.2 just to make sure there is that separation from the subject and the background. It looks great in real life. You get home, open the photo on your computer, and you're a bit disappointed because the photo looks almost like a 2D drawing. There is no shape to it. The subject is blending in with the background, even though you shot it at f1.2, and you're not quite sure why this has happened. So you try to edit the photo heavily to bring it back. You add local contrast, you add heavy color grading to try and separate your subject, but it just ends up looking a bit of a mess. Why does this happen? Well, because when you look at it with your eyes, you see the world in 3D because you have two eyes. So even if the subject and the background are an identical color, you could still tell them apart very easily. Your camera, on the other hand, does not see the world like you do. It does not see it in 3D. It does not understand depth like you do. So you need to do something else to help your camera take a photo that matches what your eyes are seeing. Next time you watch one of your favorite films, specifically really cinematic films, Joker, The Irishman, I'm sure the Elton John movie as well, just pay close attention. And every time you see a particular scene that looks very cinematic and just looks really good and almost can be a photo on its own, just pause the movie and pay close attention to where the source of light is coming from and how the subject are positioned with regards to that source of light. I am willing to bet that the vast majority of those scenes are either backlit or the light is coming directly from the side. So it's hitting your subject or the subject in the movie, either, let's say, 45 degrees, 90 degrees, or behind the subject. The reason for that is unless there is a clear difference between your subject and the background. So for example, subject's wearing a bright red coat, background is, let's say, pure white. Unless you have that kind of extreme contrast, if you don't have the correct lighting, you will find that the subject and the background will start to blend together to the point where there is no real differentiation between the two, or you have to really focus to try and pick out the subject from the background. Furthermore, if the source of light and the camera are coming from the same angle. So let's say you got a guy crossing the street and then you're shooting, let's say that way, but then the sun is behind you and it's going in the same direction. Then what you'll find is the subject and the background will be evenly lit, or in other words, will be flat lit. Therefore, the subject and the background will start to blend together a little bit more. And because the light is hitting the subject flat, at least as far as your camera can see, there is nothing for the light to wrap around. And when light wraps around an object, that's when you get the graduation of tone, which is what gives the object a 3D-like perception on a 2D photo. What I'm trying to get at here is the first thing you need to start doing is paying close attention to where the source of light is coming from in your photos. If you're shooting in the same direction as the light source, then chances are you will not get the most 3D image or the most separation from your subjects and your backgrounds. The moment you start to play with the light source, obviously you can't play with the sun, but you can play with where you're standing in relation to the sun, then you can start to add a 3D tone to your photos. You can then start to sidelight or backlight your subject in relation to the backgrounds. Therefore, you will start to create a lot more separation and a lot more contrast within your images. At this point, I want to say a thank you to today's video sponsor, which is Squarespace. My iPad, if I'm traveling, I can do it on my laptop because I'm taking photos rather than dealing with more natural contrast into the image. And when I say natural contrast, it's completely different to just increasing the contrast slider in Lightroom. I mean, if your subject is backlit, you will have a lot of shadows, a lot of highlights, and a very contrasty image. As a matter of fact, in many of my photos, I actually reduce the contrast and reduce the clarity slightly in Lightroom just to manage it because it is so contrasty straight out of camera. And what does that actually do to your photos? Well, when you have a contrasty photo, straight away, you have a photo that appears to be sharper because you could see a lot more differences between shadows and highlights. If you take a boring gray photo with no good lighting, you can use the best lens in the world. And sure, if you zoom into 400%, it'll be pin sharp. But when you zoom out, it will still look all blurry and a bit messy. Whereas you can take a good contrasty photo using a phone, and because there is so much natural contrast, it will appear to be sharp from a distance, even though if you look closer up, it might not be as sharp as the very high-end camera. Furthermore, when we take these high contrast photos, especially during the winter when the sun is low, we'll also introduce color contrast into the photo. So for example, the parts of the image which will be brightly lit by the sun, you'll find will have a slightly warm orangey glow to them, whereas parts of the image that are in shadow will have a cooler, more bluish glow to them. And that color contrast goes further to make the image stand out just a bit more. Okay, I hope you found this video useful. So to summarize, lighting is the most important part of photography. You can have the best subject in the world, you can have the best composition in the world, you can be at the best location in the world. If your light is not good, you will not have a good photo. Equally, you can have a very boring, a very mundane object or subject, and if the lighting is bang on, then you will end up with a very pleasing photo. So just remember, anytime you go to take a photo, just take a step back and observe the scene. Where is the light coming from? How is the light interacting with your subject? How is the light hitting your subject? How is the light hitting the background? Does your subject stand out from the background, or are they blending in together? The more you go through this thought process, the more automated it will become. So in the future, after enough practice, you'll end up in a position where you will just read the scene incredibly quickly, and you won't actually actively stand there and think where the light is coming from. You will see it, you will position yourself to be at the right place so that when the subject walks through your frame, you'll have the best light, the right composition, and a fantastic image at the end of it. Just one caveat to all of this: flat, boring light is not necessarily bad on its own, right? Because there will be certain images that will work with a flat, boring source of light. However, in my experience, I've just found that the percentage of those images is so insignificant compared to the images which will work much better with a good source of light. So it will work now and again, but it's not an excuse to not pay good attention to lighting. Okay, that's everything for today's video. I hope you have found it useful. If you have, give it a like. If you have your thoughts on this matter, please write them down below. I shall see you in the next one. Have a good week, and I'll speak to you soon. It's been emotional. Stay safe, and I'll speak to you in a bit. Bye.
Okay, first of all, before I show the next one, I'd like to hear what you learned from this.
That was good. I liked him. I'll look for more of his videos.
Yeah, I would say it all starts with the light.
Mhm,
And the direction of light.
mhm. It was so clear looking at his examples of backlight and sidelight and how dramatic it makes the image.
Okay, what I would like with that in mind, if I can get my, okay, I put some links here.
For some reason, Steve, the screen is shrunk down to a center line, horizontal.
Really? Do you see a picture now?
No,
We have the word desktop to the left there. We have you back.
All right, let me try again. Share screen. Okay.
Now
Wow.
we have a portrait of somebody.
Okay, actually, this is, I wanted to show this as an example. Oh, no.
bye, Andy.
Oh. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a lighting example of just where I can't claim that, oh, I was a really wizard and got everything right. But I was standing in this area and at Lake Paris, this guy was doing some parachuting. And we're in this room, but the big open door and the light coming in from the side. And he was paying a lot of attention. I liked his expression. And then I saw a guy in a red coat standing behind him. So I moved to where I had the red coat as a background. I had the side light. And I think I got a very dramatic picture because of the lighting.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's see if I can get to where I really want to be. There we go. You can see my desktop now.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
great shot.
Okay, well that's now let's see if I picked, oops, that's the one we just did. Okay. Now in this case, this was taken in Vietnam, and I'm sure some of you have seen this several times, but I think it's a good example of what he was talking about. This is an area of Vietnam near Munai that has several big sand dunes, and they're used for recreation, ATV vehicles, and all kinds of things. But we were parked down to the left here, and the idea was, our tour guide was, we're going to go up on the hill and see the sunset. As we're walking towards to do that, I look up and I say, well, wait a minute. Forget the sunset. I'm going to take a picture of all these people who are backlit. And so this is a definitely 100% backlit picture. And I think it's very dramatic.
Yes.
Lovely.
It looks like you had all those people posing for you.
Actually only this one. And then, oh, no, they
But
had no
doesn't,
idea.
if you were to tell people how to stand to look interesting, I mean, you got some people that are talking to one another, and one lady with her hand on her hip and one has her foot up. I mean, everybody's just perfect. It's just such a great moment.
Mhm. Yeah.
So sometimes you get lucky. Just be
Yep.
prepared. Okay, now let's go back to another YouTube, and if I can remember which guy it was, I should have been. Okay, it has to do with it's probably this one.
We
Yeah.
like to look at light.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
I thought you guys could relate to this
We
because a
learn to
couple of
look at
old men
light.
talking.
I am a natural light photographer. I don't look for jobs that require artificial light. I hate strobes because it's so difficult to control them unless you have a vast amount of experience. I tend to use hot lights, but the secret to lighting really is looking at light. You have to look at it as the camera looks at it. That's the secret, not just, I can see detail in the left-hand side of your face perfectly clearly. But, the camera won't see it that way, obviously. Right, I'm exposed to the highlights, and it will be a very sharp contrast. It's not just that you see what light does on a subject, it's knowing how your camera will record it. Yeah. Because I like dark areas in photographs. I like photographs that leave you asking questions. I don't want photographs that give you all the answers there. It's all in front of you. I like to keep dark areas with no information in them. And Kodachrome allows that. Digital photography doesn't necessarily. You can change it so that it does. And I try and replicate that. But I knew exactly how Kodachrome would react to light, and I know how my digital cameras will react to light, and exactly what I need to do to get the effect I'm after. And you have to do that as a photographer. You have to practice and shoot things under different lighting conditions so that you know exactly what the end result is going to look like. I always tell students that, as most photography teachers do, the camera should become an extension of you. The cameras get in the way of photography. If you're aware of the camera and not constantly adjusting the camera, you're not looking intensely enough at your subject. It would be nice if you could imprint the image straight onto your brain somehow. The camera gets in the way. But having said that, I always check, particularly with modern cameras, with digital cameras, there are so many controls on them, and it is so easy to forget. I always check the ISO rating, but sometimes I'll be shooting in a dark space like this space here, for example, and rate it at 1600 ISO, which with modern digital cameras produces superb results. Right. And I had an embarrassing moment last year. I was shooting in a wine cave, and then I had to take a photograph of the whole of the winery staff, including the owner, the winemaker, everybody. I got them all outside in fairly bright sun. And after the shoot, and they'd all gone, I realized I left it on 1600 ISO. And miraculously, the shots were fine. Wow. But now I always double check ISO. I check white balance. I check the exposure compensation. I check everything on the camera as often as I can, really, because it's so easy to do something and then forget about it. Yeah. There are two kinds of lights. There's this shot where the light is completely within the frame. There is no external light source. It's often called Rembrandt lighting, although Rembrandt didn't really paint that way all the time. There's a painter from an 18th century painter from England that did. All his paintings had light emanating from within the painting itself. And I take photographs like that occasionally where the light source is entire within the frame. At the other extreme, there's a type of lighting that I use extensively, which is often called Vermeer lighting, which is light coming through a window like this, a north window light, which is very soft and very flattering. And this photograph taken of a tobacco farmer in Trinidad is using that kind of lighting. As a travel photographer, I don't have the luxury of being able to carry a lot of equipment. I don't want to carry a lot of equipment. Equipment gets in the way. It's always the biggest problem with photography. There's too much equipment. Yeah. It's not important. So rather than light someone, I will move the person to the right. And with this tobacco farmer in Cuba, I moved him to an area in his barn where there was nice soft north light coming through to replicate this Vermeer look. Now I use that a lot. I love this kind of lighting, particularly against the dark background. It always looks great. And then you work with the person to get the right expression and the right energy from the person to make the photograph. But again, look at the eyes. Always make sure the eyes are well lit. So those are two extreme forms of light. And then there's light that bounces around. And I'll go to, I'll try and get people in the shade. Yeah, harsh sunlight rarely works. Yeah. So I try and get something in the shade, like this woman in a remote rural part of Cuba. I loved the curlers in her hair, but I wanted a soft light on her face. And then to give it nice even lighting. It's not really Vermeer lighting because it's coming from a broader surface, but it gives this nice soft bounce light that's bouncing around. And if there's not quite enough light, sometimes I use even a sheet of newspaper, if you can find a newspaper these days, and try and bounce sun back into someone's face. You can always find something you can use to bounce light with. And newspapers work beautifully. Reflectors are not something that I use a lot, but occasionally you'll need them.
And then, like as you said, just seeing where the light source is and moving your subject so it's the kind of lighting that you want.
One tip I can give for photographing people in sunlight, you know, a lot of photographers think that midday is the worst time of day to shoot. And it's certainly not ideal. I wouldn't choose to shoot at midday, but if you're a travel shooter, you have to shoot whenever there's light. Even when there isn't light, you just shoot continually because it's expensive to travel and you don't have the luxury of waiting around. This photograph of the same tobacco farmer in Western Cuba, I shot probably around about midday. It was bright sunlight, as you can see from the light coming on the left-hand side of his face. So I moved in with his back to the camera. There's a bit of bounce coming from a wall just behind me. And it gave this really nice light. It gives a kick into his eyes so that the light on his eyes is nice. And then you just wait for the right expression. And I wanted this sort of expression with him, doing something with his hand that gave the photograph a little bit of energy and more interest than just a straight portrait. But the important thing is the lighting. And often if it's bright sunlight, I'll just shoot against the sun, shoot into the sun. And very often you play the exposure so that you don't need bounce. But if you get a little bit of bounce, that's better still, because that will give a catch light in the eyes.
Can we see an example of shooting into the sun?
An example like this of two women in Myanmar smoking cheroots, and the sun illuminates the smoke. Without the backlighting, you wouldn't see the smoke. Absolutely. It would be a dead shot. But by shooting it in this direction, it emphasizes the smoke. You get a nice rim light on the faces. So it just works. So don't think just because it's harsh sunlight, you're not going to be able to make decent portraits or decent photographs, period. You know, I shoot a lot during the day and get some nice shots. It doesn't need to be said the best time of the golden hours, an hour sunset, an hour at sunrise. You know, this when the light is when light is the prettiest.
Yes.
And everybody knows that. Or at least all you photographers out there should know
about that.
Yeah, you should know about that.
So you got to get up early and get those golden hours before you go off and
out before sunrise, have dinner after the sunset. But what I really like is after the sun's gone down in the blue hour, after the sun's gone, and you get this beautiful blue light, which when it's mixed with artificial light, you get effects like this. It was a barber shop in Trinidad, Cuba. It's where I'd had a disastrous haircut earlier in the day. But I just happened to be walking by in the evening, and the blue of the walls was enhanced by the twilight, and the inside light, the warm inside light, contrasts beautifully with the light outside. Now, I love this play of colors with the light.
You really have that feel, don't you, for what light is doing and the colors and what it's going to look like in the final photograph.
Yeah, this is an example of why you should be aware of what your camera is capable of doing.
Yeah.
Because it didn't look like this to your eye. Your eyes compensate.
Right.
They compensate for color difference. They compensate for differences in color temperature. Cameras are literal. Your eyes adjust continually. So that, which is one of the things you have to remember about how a camera records shadow areas. To me, I can see in the corner of the room here, which is dark, and see Holly here, and I can see details in Holly's clothing, although it's dark blue and black, but a camera won't see that.
Right.
If we get the highlights recorded properly, everything else is going to go dark with no detail. And that's one of the important things you should always remember in taking photographs. Always expose to the highlights. That opens up themselves, is as we did with film.
Actually, it doesn't, yeah, okay. So I want to thank you guys for, are we rolling?
Yeah, we're rolling. I'm rolling.
Let's do it again. Does that mean we're rolling? Okay, I want to thank you guys for watching and be sure to subscribe. We want you to like if you like our.
Okay, how'd you guys like that one?
Good,
That was good. That was
very inspiring.
Yeah, even old men can take pictures, so that's been very inspiring for us.
I like when he said that camera gear gets in his way, and there's a picture of him out shooting in a village or something, and he's got two huge bodies and these long lenses, you know, strapped to my God, that's a lot of gear.
Yeah, Amy and I got some really good pictures of tobacco farms in Cuba.
Yeah,
Maybe
I also thought it was the same farmer. Did you, when you first
No,
saw that?
no, it's not. I recognize the face. But
Yeah, I thought, I was thinking maybe it was he'd gotten older or something when we shot him, but no, it was different. But that's similar to that guy.
Yeah. So, well, we're at 4 o'clock almost, and I have another short one I can show you, or we can call it a day. What do you want to do?
How short?
I think it's 2.5, 3 minutes.
I'm game. Is everybody else
Oh,
game?
that's good.
Couple
That's
more
good.
minutes.
All right,
Roll it.
let's roll it. Let's get. Oops. Okay, and it's now you guys will like this. Speaking of old men, this is a
For me, a
beautiful
good
young girl.
story, it's many different things. When it comes to photography, I always say that a good story takes us somewhere we haven't been before. It has the power to undo assumptions. It has the power to allow us to imagine something different from what we've been given, from our own realities. My name is Hannah Reyes Morales. I'm a National Geographic photographer and explorer from the Philippines. When I was younger, I lived in the center of Manila. The source of any information I had about the outside world was whatever was in my house. And one of the most important things I think that ever happened to me was bumping into this dusty old shelf that my mother had, where she had National Geographic magazines and Life magazines. I was maybe too young to really process the text and the information there. But when I was looking through the photos, it made me care about the world in a way that no other medium had ever made me feel. There was something about photographs that even if I knew it was far away, I felt that it had something to do with me. And I think that's the power of a still frame. I can stay with it for as long as I want and it doesn't move on. I just always knew that I wanted to engage with the world. And this was one way that I would do it, you know, with a camera in my hand. It became this thing that allowed me to connect. Eventually, I got a grant from National Geographic when I was about 23 or 24. And it allowed me to have a relationship with an organization that has a really wide reach and that can really amplify a voice. I was able to mentor with photographer Erica Larson, and that truly was very life-changing for me. Being able to talk to someone whose work you truly, truly look up to. You know when your story is real when you don't have to grasp for it. You're not like trying to find the story. It's just there. I think we find the most profound and deep things in like what is perceived as the most daily life activities. She empowered me in a way that wasn't prescriptive. She makes you realize your own power, and she makes you realize your own strengths. What I'm noticing is that you're trusting you. Because those are really intimate moments, right? What makes a good photograph for me has changed throughout my life. When I was younger, to me, a good photograph was looking at images of places that I had never been before and just the fact of that. But I think now a good photograph for me is something that makes me go, I'd never looked at the world that way. For a long time, how we define good images have not been defined by women or people of color. And I think that's important when we talk about what is a good image. Who defines what is a good image? And how are those images used? And how are those images uplifted? You want the world to be documented in a way that reflects the diversity of it. I'm inspired by Lynn Johnson, Malin Fezahai, Laurel Chor, Bobby Stever, Evgenia Arbogeva, Erica Larson. These people are documenting the world in a way that just allows me to think differently. I gravitate towards stories that allow me to meet people who have a certain resilience, individuals who can show me how love and how joy and how tenderness exists amidst suffering, amidst adversity. And then I begin to understand love, joy, and tenderness in a different light. I'm currently working on a project called Living Lullabies.
I think the way you've structured it is good because I think they feel more complete.
And it looks at how different caregivers across the world prepare children for sleep in different sorts of environments, often environments fraught with hazard. And it looks at the lullaby as a vector for sense making and place making. When we're looking at critical issues that are at the top of the global agenda, we don't realize that in those spaces, women and children are impacted in a different way, and often they're impacted more. For this particular story, I'm trying to engage with that through the lullabies that they sing. What I love about photography is that it's a confrontation with the world. You are not asking questions in a confined academic setting. You're asking questions out in the world. And I think that every student and every learner has an important story to tell, whether that's their own story, whether that's stories from their community. Photographic storytelling allows you to honor the narratives that are happening around you. People can get behind a good story. People get behind a narrative. People who can tell good stories can truly rally people to get behind certain things, certain causes. Good stories elicit empathy, and I think empathy is one of the most important roots of change.
Okay, well, first of all, let me just say I am blown away by her pictures, her photographs. They are so inspiring and gives you a lot to think about. And the other thing is, it's really nice to have National Geographic behind you, Mr.
Well,
Morning.
I am
That's
a natural light photographer.
Oh, wait a minute.
I don't look for jobs that require artificial light.
Hey, let me get
I
this thing
hate
to stop.
strobes because it's it's so difficult to control them unless you have a vast amount of experience. I tend
There we go.
That
And
was
Andy,
good.
if you'll notice that she was using a Sony.
I was wondering how many of you would notice that.
I was kind of surprised she didn't have a lens shade on.
Well, equipment gets in your way.
That does.
She has a great way of seeing the world. So, and maybe for her, what she's doing, the lens shade is just another thing that makes your camera look more like a weapon.
Yeah.
And makes it stand out more. So, she can be a little bit more discreet. So,
Yeah,
well,
the camera and
anybody else
What's
have any? Oh, let me say one other thing about lighting, and then this is back to understanding light. And I got a good reason for saying this, so bear with me. When you look at the sun is 93 million miles away, and light travels at 186,000 miles per second. So when you look at the sun, you're not seeing the sun as it is. You're seeing what it looked like 8 minutes ago. Because it takes 7 to 8 minutes for the light from the sun to reach us. Now the moon, I forget the mileage of the moon, but it takes about 1 second for light to get to the moon because it's a lot closer. What does that have to do with our photography? When you take a picture and you have an image, you have just captured a slice of time. It's like you took, here's this timeline, and you just took a cleaver and chopped out this section of time. And that's your image. And even if I were standing 3 feet away from Doug and I take his picture, that picture is what he looked like several nanoseconds before I snapped the shutter. So I know I'm boring you all with this. So, but,
And it was a philosophical comment.
That's right.
yeah.
We'll never
I
get
have a
that
couple-
moment back again.
Yeah.
All
I have
right.
a couple comments. One, the blue moon rises at 7:35 or something tonight. And a question for everybody, where do bad rainbows go? Prism.
Where do they go?
Prism.
Prism.
That That's a top of the line dad joke, you know.
Yeah, that's it. We survived a dad joke just now.
I'm sorry, Larry, I had to step on that.
Okay, anybody else have anything they want to add? Any enlightenment?
Amy, there was a Sony camera. I
Come to
expect you to
come
get
to the
good
egg
pictures.
tomorrow. Oh, sorry, Rolly.
Raleigh, what were you saying, Raleigh?
I said that was a Sony camera, so I expect Amy to get some good pictures.
No pressure, thanks for that.
But she's gonna have to go to the Philippines.
I know, because that's where the nice lighting is.
Yeah, okay,
Come to
well,
come to the egg tomorrow.
Have a great show, you guys. I'm sorry I'm not there to see it.
Okay, thank you.
all right,
All right,
bye.
Bye.
see you later.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Steve.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, we'll see y'all tomorrow.